to God. He reminded me at the base it was all about Jesus. So I got kind of back on track. I started going to his church. His youth pastor started encouraging me, started building me up, started telling me that, man, Chad, you can make a difference for God. God can use you where you are. I love that. Who doesn't like being encouraged? And I'm a good guy. It reminded me it wasn't me that committed the sin that my sister committed, that whole thing. So I was back on the road. And I sensed a call on my life into ministry, so I went away and studied Bible and theology at college, and I'm going to be a pastor. And all of that was good. In my early 20s, I met a person, a young lady, and I thought, wow, I like this young lady, and it's time to get married, right? Because that's what us men do. And I've been a good boy, so I decided it's time to get married. And it's time to start a family, and all of that stuff. So when I chose to do this, there was one young lady that I'd been getting to know and decided, well, it may as well be her, right? Pretty much is how I did it, actually. And so we started the whole courtship thing, but I had my parents and some others start saying, I see some warning flags. I see some potential issues here. I went so far as to the person who did our premarital counseling saying, you really shouldn't get married. But, young 23-year-old men, right? Nobody knows what's best for me except for me. And so we chose to go ahead with this, and everything was wonderful for about 2 days. And on the surface, things look great. We figured out how to play the cards so that young preacher boy in a church looked good. But at home, things weren't good. We didn't get along. We had completely different makeups, and belief systems were raised completely different. Our heads butted on everything. You name it, we disagreed about it. It was that bad. It was tough. So we endured for a while and then decided there's no way we can keep doing it like this. So we went and got marital counseling from a Christian counselor. Things got better for a little bit, and then they'd get worse. And then they'd get better for a little bit, and then they'd get worse. And we went through lots of ups and downs. About 6 years in, there was a lot more downs than ups. And I was the senior pastor at a church, and I confided in my associate pastor at the time that things were pretty rocky, pretty rough, pretty difficult, and that I was just drained and empty spiritually, emotionally. And I thought maybe that would help sharing with somebody, and he gave me the name of a Christian counselor that we should go see again, and I went and saw him. He was wonderful. But then things started getting really difficult in the church because I realized that this associate of mine kind of shared with some other people without my permission kind of what was happening in my marriage, and things were rough, and that just made it even worse because then people are staring at you and you know what they're thinking. And my wife at the time decided I'm not going to that church anymore. She couldn't handle the pressure, and honestly I couldn't blame her. I didn't like it either. But God didn't release me from where I was, and I believed that with all of my heart. And so I continued going along for a couple more years, and we do the therapy thing every week, and it wasn't working. It just wasn't helping. Though I, was a little bit blind thinking that it was. But I came home one day, and my wife said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm ready to go and live my life, not this life. And we had a long discussion. That wasn't a good discussion. It was a hard discussion. And me, if you remember, one of my moral codes on my journey was, once you're married, you do not get a divorce. That is an evil. That is a sin. My theology on sin was that you didn't sin, that you kept away from it. If Jesus was in my heart, I no longer am going to sin. And what I found is that I was full of brokenness. See, I'd been on a journey, a spiritual journey, and building up my idolatry to God. Oh, did I say that? Yes, my idolatry to God. All of these things I thought pleased God and honored God, that were actually worship of how wonderful and great that I am. And I began to realize that in essence, in reality, I am a broken, beaten up, left for dead man. I had no life, no energy, no drive. I did the only thing I could do. I resigned my position in that church, and that was it. It was goodbye. There was no support. There was no love. There was no church there for me. Worship pastor at the time of our church kind of helped for a little bit, was there, but when it started getting rough, decided the pressure from those around him that he no longer could take it either, and I found myself alone. Now, picture this. Everybody has to have a job, right? And everybody has to put food on the table. Chad became night watchman in a downtown Louisville, Kentucky sky rise, and put on the blue polyester pants and the little blue polyester shirt, and put on the little fake tin badge thing, and walked around without a gun, but I had a flashlight. And I walked through buildings late at night where there is nobody. Talk about cutting back on budgets. They definitely, large corporations could get rid of night watchmen, because I walked around empty building all by myself night after night, looking in empty rooms. And I don't know about you, but when you start looking in empty, dark rooms long enough, you start seeing things. I started seeing people. I started seeing things. It was exhausting. And in the spiritual, emotional state I was in, staying up all night long from 7 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning was awful for me. And so one night, one of my jobs was to go up onto the 36th floor of the building to sweep the rooftop and make sure that there had been nobody that snuck up there and was hiding during the day, and to make sure that, everything was okay. And while I was up there, a brilliant idea crossed my mind. You know what? Life's horrible. I could just really end it right now. If you know me, which you don't really, that's not me. I'm a fairly confident person. I've been fairly confident my entire life. My parents tried to tell me as a youngster and as a teenager that I had a problem with confidence. So confidence was not an issue that I had ever struggled with. But in this moment when I was all alone and ashamed to go home or to really let people know who I was and what was really happening in me, I had a moment where it seemed better to die than to live. I had been passed by a religious leader. I had been passed by a worship leader. Broken, beaten up, without hope. And it reminds me of this story that we're so familiar with. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw him, he passed him by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he was traveling, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." I want to turn on its ear 2,000 years of theology and belief that the church has held. When we read this story, we ask the question, am I the religious expert, the priest? Am I the worship expert, the Levite? Or am I the good Samaritan? But I think maybe we have missed something. I believe that the one who binds our wounds and picks us up and carries us is Jesus. So where are you and I in the story? We are the traveler who has been beaten, stripped of our clothes, and left half dead on our spiritual journey. Who are we? We are those who have a problem and an infestation of sin, who have built up belief systems that have left us broken. What is sin? My whole life, the question I have had is, what is sin? What does it take to inherit eternal life? I was told Jesus plus all of these things. And what I have found is Jesus was the only one there for me when I was broken. So I had to throw away what I believed about the church. Nice. What I found is that my moral code wasn't good enough. I still felt broken. What I found is that the fact that I stayed pure until I was married wasn't good enough. I found out that having in my mind that I would never get a divorce was not good enough. I found out that all of these things left me broken and hurting with no place to turn. And so I had to get rid of everything until there was nothing left but Jesus. And when I was broken down to the very core and the essence of who I was, I figured out that I could not find healing anywhere but Jesus. I carried the shame and the doubts and the fears about my divorce, believing that there was no way that God could ever use this man in ministry ever again. I thought my life was next to dead, that I would live out a meaningless existence the rest of my life. And so I began the process of saying, Jesus, even at this moment when I have nothing, I will believe, I will follow, and I will do whatever it is you ask me to do. So I left my skyscraper job and that place that was so evil for me, and a friend, an innkeeper, took me in. My best friend in the world said, come and stay with me and let's get you healthy and whole. From there, I found my next step on the journey was to go home, to go to my parents and find healing with them and those around my home. And I worked meaningless jobs. I was working in let me rephrase that because that was very, very wrong. It wasn't a meaningless job. I was working in a factory, but to me, it felt like something other than what God had created me to do. But I had to have money. And so I did it. And I began to find that God was healing me. Using my hands and working and using my body was a way that God was healing me. You see, I found that I was the broken man on the road, beaten up by religion, beaten up by this theology of sin. Sin is brokenness.